All right, we're back.
It's like meditative.
It is. We should have something more abrasive, less soothing. Do like the industrial, the 9 Inch Nails version of that song. I can work on that.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Project Failure Files. The series for anyone and everyone who manages people, projects, processes, things, places, stuff for a living. I'm Sharon Weaver, CEO of Smarter Consulting.
And I am Christian Buckley, founder of Collab Talk. And welcome to another episode of our series where Sharon and I explore management topics from the perspective of what not to do. So we try to have fun with the titles. In each episode, we talk about the common pitfalls, share some personal stories and experiences, and explore strategies and best practices to help you to be successful.
Mostly just share stories and pitfalls and funny things.
Cry a little on the inside sometimes.
Little bit. So in this episode, we are talking about the problem of employee disengagement or apathy towards managers, projects, tasks, maybe even the company.
I think I was thinking about this, Sharon, of one of the positives to come out of the pandemic, so many wonderful things that happened out of that. But I think was a more of an inward look at employee health and well-being, which has been a problem for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, burnout's a real actual thing. I definitely think we don't spend enough time really understanding it, managing to it. It's really great to have those kind of conversations, definitely at the leadership level, but also really to connect with direct reports or, employees or even contractors, resources, vendors. It's really nice to understand like how people are doing to make sure that everybody's in the right headspace.
I would say to be careful to not make it a leadership initiative, that it should be something that managers at every level, and even if you're a project manager that doesn't manage people, but project and process, that side of it, I would even say that should be part of your regimen, your process to, touch bases. How are people doing and connecting with folks? That might be an indication of like why someone's not finishing tasks that you're waiting for. Have a conversation with them. I've always considered myself a manage by walking around person. So I try to get a sense of the stress levels, what's going on, who's busy, who's got some free time on the team for resource planning, whether there's something that I can help with to unblock them in their projects, their stakeholders, to see that there's good communication that's happening with peers and stakeholders, and just to get that overall vibe for how things are going within the organization.
Yeah, we're going to get into all of that, and we'll talk about like how to kind of make a good game plan, how you can build those kinds of checks and balances into your organization, or at least within the team or the project or the area that you manage.
I'm looking forward to this. I mean, we both have experiences around this and stories to tell. So I think it'll be a great conversation as always. And as with every episode, please feel free to comment throughout the episode and share your experiences and any great examples or feedback that we may have missed. So if you've got a juicy failure, especially, please reach out, because we're going to start this new interview series as part of this show. And so we are going to interview managers, project managers, operations folks out there. If you would like to be on the show and part of that, reach out to us as well.
Yeah, definitely let us know. Okay, let's get started with some definitions. So, Christian, why are you so disengaged?
Yeah, I don't want to get into it right now, Sharon, but this is one of those things where, again, if you go and have a conversation with somebody, if they seem checked out, mentally, they're there in the office every day. Maybe they're doing their tasks, but they're kind of running through the motions. If you just get a sense of that, have a one-on-one, like pull them, like, hey, everything going on? Is everything good? If you are aware of the lives of people, it could be, look, there's something that's going on at a personal level that's impacting. There is, concerns about something there. It could be that they are holding back on bad news. And so if you don't have that relationship with people to have that conversation, you may never get that level of detail, and it will cause problems. You could lose that person. It could become toxic for the team.
Yeah, I mean, I always like to say this, and I mean, I do so much coaching and mentoring and supporting, and no matter who I'm talking to, I always say everybody always is dealing with something. It's just a matter of what and how much. What kind of burden do they have that day? And for the most part, most people have good enough days that they're totally fine and they're functional. But sometimes, and it doesn't really even matter what it is, right? Sometimes there's just days where people can't cope, where they can't handle it. And I think this gets to be a really political charge discuss topic of, well, what is your responsibility as a business, as a leader, as a manager, and also depending on what role you're in. But I think at the end of the day, that's not the discussion. The discussion is, as human beings, I believe it's our responsibility to make the other human beings that we are working around feel supported and validated, and it in a way that if something's going on, they know that there's somebody there that's going to help them get through it, so that if something comes up that they can't handle, or something comes up that's going to keep them from being successful at work, they at least have somebody that they can turn to.
Yeah, it's thinking about this too, is that I often say that for a lot of what we do, you have to have a clinical approach. Like the doctor has to be able to deliver the bad news. Like, I'm sorry, like you have cancer. Here's what we need to go and do. And a lot of it, like it's to be able to go have those difficult conversations. I remember I was managing somebody. My director is like, are you going to be able to go and do that? Because I was friends with this person. I said, yeah, I mean, look, they realize that they're not performing. So I moved them over into the managed performance, put them on a performance plan. And it sucked to have the conversation, but it was, he knew he was like waiting to have that conversation. And so I was able to go and have that because of that clinical approach, which doesn't mean that I can't be, empathetic to the issues that are going on. And so sometimes there is, and again, this is the clinical approach to that, is that, look, it just doesn't make sense that you here with this role, this is what we need. You're not able to do that. Like, I understand. I feel bad about this. We'll give you like some time. This is what we can do. It's like, but we have to have these outcomes. We have to have these numbers. And if you're not performing, like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I think that's part of it too. Like, I feel like if you have that relationship with the people on your team, the people that you're working with to begin with, if you're doing it right, you should already kind of have a pulse on how things are going, and you should be able to say those things, and it shouldn't really come as a big surprise to anybody, good or bad, right? You should already kind of be in a relationship with your team where you guys have an open, and we've talked about this many times, an open and transparent, culture to where, you kind of know what's going on and they feel like they can trust you enough. And I'm not talking about everybody has to be intimate, personal BFFs, but enough that if there's something going on, we can deal with this together.
I've had conversations too where I've asked like peers and stakeholders, feedback of the people that they're working with, and we were all unaware of, we weren't seeing the cues around that because we're so focused on deliverables and timelines and these relationships with customers and all the things that we're going and doing. And so it can be shocking, surprising that somebody's like, I'm burned out, or but when somebody becomes disengaged, when they start reeling back and they're really not making the effort on a daily basis, those tend to be more visible because it starts impacting the rest of the organization. I mean, what are some of the cues? What are some of the things that you see, the behavior changes, or the things that you look for to say that, hey, maybe there's something else going on and need to go have this difficult conversation?
Yeah, I think, a lot of times you'll start noticing that maybe they show up to things late, or they maybe miss more meetings, or they're not responding to things, maybe not at all, maybe not in a timely manner. Behaviorally they change, right? So if you have somebody who is kind of on top of things and then all of a sudden kind of drops off and stops responding and, is kind of distracted and things like that, that's kind of a cue for me. And, not everybody is like high performers either. So maybe you've got somebody who's just more steady, who tends to be less steady. And then, of course, you've got some of those people who just kind of 100% like detach. And the next thing you know, like they haven't shown up to a meeting, they're, missing things, they're not responding to things. And you're like, okay, something's clearly going on here. And so I think it depends on the person, but there's definitely obvious cues usually that kind of manifest in the way of non-responsiveness or less responsiveness, or kind of just missing things.
Yeah. What's funny, we always talk about, in project management is risk management, especially, is, the earlier that you can identify a risk, the potential risk, and then be able to plan for that, talk about it, be ready for it, then, the less likely that thing will happen. If you are managing a project that way, where you're watching what could happen, and if that happened, here's what we would go and do. This falls into that category. If you're not paying attention to the social cues, whether people are like, again, they could have been a high performer, like you said, but then suddenly they're not asking questions in meetings, where they're always the most vocal, like, what's going on? That gets back to, like, culturally, like, knowing your people. That's why I don't remember who said this, but like the magic number is really for any person, for number of direct reports. And I know we've all been in management situations where it's been blown out of proportion, but it's 5 to 7 people. Because I've managed as most direct report managed, but the largest I had was 40 people. And that was before there was no structure. It was very flat. Went and put structure in place so that it was more manageable. But even absorbing another small team, having 12 to 14 people, like, I was just doing nothing but one-on-ones and reporting and things around that. I wasn't able to really get my hands in and help with what was needed to be done. 5 to 7 is just kind of that magic number. You then can start to recognize the cues. The people well enough. You can still be clinical, separate, like, I'm your manager, like, hey, we need to keep this professional, and yet know some of the detail and be able to adjust based on what you're seeing.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And, and I don't think, like I said, you don't have to be a BFF to recognize when somebody is performing differently or responding differently or doing something that's out of character for them. And I think it's really, being able to identify it and then being able to strategize ways of kind of bringing them back into the fold and working with them.
One of the reasons why I like having a structured, project management methodology is because you have certain things that happen at the beginning with the kickoff. You've got like the definitions in place, and some people look at it as like, here's this bureaucratic layer and things on top. It's like, no, it's important for exactly this reason, to be able to go back and ask those questions. Hey, it feels like this project, and it might be the individual that's going kind of sideways, but is this project on track? Let's look at it. Let's review it. Where we are today based on what the vision was for this, what the stated goals, the plan outcomes, the timeline, all those kinds of things. In my maybe you disagree, Sharon, but if you have that kind of structure in place, you're less likely going to have people that then go and wander and become disengaged. for me, like they may be unhappy in personal issues or other things out there, but from the project perspective, getting those things done to drive the business forward, the reason that we're there and being paid to do that needs to be, a high priority. You don't want to do that to the detriment of people's health and well-being, those kinds of things. But if the project's moving forward, you can go and address those other things. If the project's going sideways, is it because you were off, there was something different, or we're no longer aligned, the business needs have changes, the stakeholders are asking for something different, all of those other things. If all of those things remain constant, it almost is a pointer back. Hey, what's going on with you? Is there what's the only thing I can see that's different here is you, and have the conversation. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, I've been through so many different companies that have used different types of methodology, but you're absolutely right. Especially the ones that were very, very specific about following Agile very, very well, to the letter. The ceremonies give you that structure, and behaviorally humans crave structure. And by having the structure, you're absolutely right. What ends up happening is the structure is not there to keep people from being having feelings or dealing with every day-to-day things. And I heard this a lot from developers over the year. Well, Agile doesn't take this into consideration. Agile doesn't take that into consideration. No, the structure does not take it into consideration. It's not designed to be flexible for everybody's emotions. What it's designed to do is create a structure that shows you when something isn't following the expected pattern. And in that case, it gives you boundaries to say something isn't fitting into this pattern, something isn't fitting into the structure right. I need to go deal with it. I need to go manage it. It's a risk that has to be managed. It's a person that has to be managed. It's an issue that has to be managed. But that structure gives us the ability, like you said, to hold the pattern up in our face and say, okay, what doesn't fit with this right now, so that I know how to manage it properly. Whereas when you don't have that clear structure, that clear methodology, I think everything becomes very emotional, and it's very difficult to decide, is this happening because it's part of the pattern? Is it happening against the pattern? Is this just the whole thing shifting? You don't have something to hold it up against as a baseline.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's true. I mean, we're talking more about your project methodology, but having a structure and how you manage and have these opportunities to have this meaningful engagement with your direct reports or the stakeholders of the project. It might be with direct reports, I'd have maybe weekly or twice a month have these one-on-ones where we're going through, and it shouldn't be a recitation of everything that they're working on, unless they want to go through every single one of those things. But here's what's going on. This project, we don't need to go to detail. It's fine. Yeah, ask some questions about it. I really want to focus most of this conversation around this, and this is what's happening. So let them drive a lot of that. But then likewise, having then the team meetings on a regular basis, twice a month. I think monthly just feels too long of a time for those kind of everybody in the team together. Hey, here's what the project, here's where you're relying cross stakeholders. Here's the priorities. And this, having that discussion so that people understand where their daily tasks are, the projects they own or are working on align with the team goals, the business unit goals, all the way up to the company goals, so that that what you're working on is driving towards, the company's initiatives and numbers that they're trying to hit. And that is that can motivate a lot of people, having those conversations and understanding where they fit into all of that. And another side of it too is that then you can also understand, and I'm sure you've never done this, but where I've assigned PMs, for example, on the same types of projects, and then they just feel bogged down by I realize I'm the expert now with this customer, this type of customer, or these types of projects, but they're incredibly boring. I want to grow. I want to do something else in the role. When are you going to have those kinds of conversations where you're not looking at what the company wants, but what does the employee want to do with their career, so that you can break up the monotony of doing the same types of projects over and over again, and better understand how you can tailor your conversations, your styles with the person so that they're getting more out of it. They feel like they're growing, they're accomplishing their goals, all of those things.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's critical. I mean, we talked about the methodology, the project ceremonies, or, I think in those meetings, you're doing that rigorous keeping up on top of things, making sure you know the status, making sure you know the task, making sure you know, managing all of your risks, right? But in these different meetings, and whatever, cadence makes sense for you and your organization is fine. I agree. At a bare minimum, I try to meet with pretty much everybody who's direct to me at least once a month, right? Just that I'm giving you an hour of time that we can talk about, like you said, what are your goals? What's your motivation? How are you feeling about things? Where are you at, generically, so that I can make sure that if I need to do something, I'm not missing that somewhere. Because while in a perfect world, every manager would like to say that they're watching and they're understanding and they notice when something's off. You're right. We get busy. We, focus on the project. We get focused on deliverables. We get focused on client. And the next thing you know, it's been months and months and months, and you haven't had a conversation with them directly. And so I try really hard. And this even in working with me, that I go out of my way to try to have those kind of one-on-one touch points on a regular basis with different people, just to say, hey, let's just talk about what's going on. And then that way we can get back on the track and we can, do what we need to do. And I think it helps. I think, and we're going to talk about this here, in a couple minutes, but I think it also gives you an opportunity, as a leader, as a manager, as a coordinator, whatever your role is. I think it gives you that opportunity to get to know them personally, but it also gives you an opportunity to understand what they need, how you can support them, how you can cheer them on, how you can proactively help them, in addition to what's happening inside the project.
Well, and that should be something that you are having as a conversation with your manager, the executive, or you as a business owner. Maybe it's even just more of an even conversation where you need to ask as a manager, what else could I be doing? How can I improve how I'm communicating things? I've always had a really hard time. I know a lot of people have a difficult time around recognizing and celebrating contributions and that side of it. I'm so much it's not that I don't appreciate and recognize it. I don't do the fanfare around that. I'll be honest, I've had some managers that were a bit over the top on kind of the cheerleader mode of celebrating the wins and stuff. And then when I switched companies, I really missed that. It was nice because they genuinely recognized what was being done. And even if it's just, again, I've worked in companies aligned with, sales organizations that were very leaderboard driven and stuff around that. And I am more competitive that way. I like that kind of stuff. I like the gamification of, the technology that allows you to go and do that. If that fits your organization, you can do that. You can, in support operations, we had a little leaderboard of who's closing the most tickets, who had the, who's getting the highest customer satisfaction, CSAT numbers. Things like that were fun for, you don't do that one with an individual. You do that team or business unit, but just encourage that kind of to make it a part of your culture that you recognize other people. In fact, a couple companies I've been with had a financial reward, and if you got a certain number of votes, and I'm trying to remember how we did it. If everybody had 5 votes and they did things, but it's 3 people got cash, got $5,000, $3,000, $1,000, and it was all based on peer votes around. This is the person who's most helpful, and was, done in a great way that it forced people to, well, say forced. You can't force people to be nice to each other and help each other.
It motivated them and encouraged them and gave them opportunity.
It made it part of the culture to be looking for opportunities to recognize others, which is fantastic. And because if you're looking for that actively, you're also more likely then going to look for ways to provide help to your coworkers.
Yeah, I think that's been a really big struggle in the virtual space, is, keeping up with people and figuring out ways. And I mean, I can tell, you said earlier, having somebody that you're following, not just, expecting this of people. But I've always got a minimum of 1, 2, 3 different people, a mixture of coaches and, advisors and people I look up to that I'm going to and asking those same questions of. But it is in the virtual space and working remote. I do think it's a different way of building those relationships. It's a different way of keeping up with each other. It's a different way of identifying when people are feeling disengaged, as opposed to when you're in a physical space where it's more visible and you can, get together. And as dumb as it sounds, like, it's so funny because there's so many memes about this, but like, I like a good pizza party. I miss the monthly birthday cakes. I do. Like, that was a big deal to me, and everybody thought they were so dumb. And I just thought they were, like, how great is that? Like, that your team cares enough to do something nice for you. And it may not be a lot, but, even on my team, I've tried to, if we have birthdays, like, stop and plan some time to just celebrate those people. And, if there's a holiday, to stop and celebrate, the team together. And I think that's a difficult thing sometimes, to keep people engaged as a group, especially in a remote space.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, go back to the key to all of this is that you need to be proactive. You can't wait for people to become disengaged, because what happens is that then there become difficulties around the project, the organization, and it kind of compounds all of those. It makes it worse. You're less able to respond. So that could even be something like, I'll go back to one of my favorite tools is like that 4-blocker, and pointing out in regular leadership presentations to say, here's the projects, here's the risks, the potential risks in our strategy. There is to flag, to say, we have a risk of, and here's a great example. I knew of 2 of my PMs that were actively interviewing elsewhere in the company. And they were fantastic people. They were like, we would hate to lose them. And I could try to communicate that to them. And so I put that in the risk profile, to where the VP even went and dropped by, just happened to be dropping by, and, hey, how are you doing on these 2 PMs, which made a world of difference. One, there was no turning him away. He went and he eventually found another role because he had his career planned out. The other one just was feeling unchallenged, a little bit unappreciated, even though it was coming from me. But having the VP come and talk to me, he stayed in that org for 3-4 years after I left. Like, he was still there. So it does make a difference, but you have to identify it. You have to have those regular check-ins, those feedback loops, to prevent the unknown. You don't want to be surprised by these things.
Yeah. I mean, and, we talk about failure files, and I mean, the funny thing is, like, I've been sitting here kind of thinking about stories, and all the different things that happen. And at the end of the day, like, I can think of a ton of different specific stories where I personally, like you just said, I know people who were looking elsewhere and they were trying to get other things, or it wasn't the right fit for them. And, I think the important thing, though, is recognizing that it is a real thing and that people do get disengaged. And, like you said, preventatively planning for, okay, if we know this is going to happen, how are we going to handle it? And it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's a great opportunity for that person. And sometimes, they're disengaged for the right reasons, but the team and the project has to be able to handle the risk of that happening.
Well, I think you and I both, process focused people that to be able to, one, the first question I'd ask if we're surprised by this disengagement, or somebody wants to leave the org, whatever that is to go back and look at the structures. Like, okay, how did we miss this? So is it that you got lax on doing the one-on-ones on a regular basis? So improve that. So, how can you constantly review that process and ask those questions to the team? Talk about the culture a lot and say, this is what we're trying to do. Are we living up to it? What can we do to better match that vision of what we want to be as a team, as an organization, so that we're fostering accountability towards the tasks that we need to do and the structure there. You're putting in place the opportunities to have the conversations by having weekly one-on-ones, twice a month team, the door's always open, for just drop in if there's something that didn't come out of either of those conversations. Anonymous feedback. This goes back to, me, Sharon, I'm really big on the whole topic of feedback loops, multiple feedback loops out there. The anonymous feedback method as well. But you make those structural changes or process changes to make sure that you're putting yourself in the place to be able to have the conversations, to recognize those things early.
Yeah.
I think because that's like anything, like developing a new habit. If you're not doing those things, if you're not putting yourself in those opportunities, in those places where you're gonna have those conversations, you're not going to have those opportunities to have a personal conversation of what's going on with your family that's of this, or some change that's happened, life change that's impacting your ability on the project. Like, do we just need to remove 3 of your 10 projects and spread it out? Are you feeling overloaded? Like, let's have that conversation.
It's so funny. I was recording a different podcast this morning.
What?
I know.
How dare you? Yeah,
I know.
I did mine yesterday. Yeah, so.
I was on a different podcast.
Yeah.
And what's really funny is the topic that came up was this idea of being prepared, and that's exactly what you're saying. Like, you're being prepared and being proactive and having a structure. So many people take that as a negative thing. They take it as why are you trying to lock me down, or why are you trying to make it so that I can't do what I need to do? Like, it's like, and the truth of the matter is, I look at it as a safety net. I look at it as when we're prepared, when we plan, when we know what our goals are, when we have those meetings scheduled, when we have those things in place, we're creating the opportunity for the highest amount of success with the lowest amount of risk and the most efficient way possible, so that we don't then have to try, like you said, we don't have to try to reinvent the wheel for every single step of every single process. We're laying out a fabric that's already done, that's a template, that is a guide that's going to, theoretically hold us to a level of success across the board. And I think it's just really, really important. And we talk about rigor all the time. We talk about methodology all the time. We say at least have something. But I think, it's not about the bureaucracy or the bloat of things, having meetings for the sake of meetings. What it is having a plan and a process and a schedule and a strategy that you think is going to keep you on track, so that you don't have to keep thinking about that every single day.
Yeah. Again, I go back and I said, instead of process, the better word for it is the culture. If you have the culture where you're having those conversations and people feel that, hey, I'm heard, I'm seen, then they're likely to come and speak up and be recognized for those things, that have those kind of conversations. This kind of thing, I know, to wrap up, we kind of went right into kind of best practices, like to summarize, disengagement really is something that is preventable if you catch it early and address it proactively. Look at process changes, resource management. Maybe they're overloaded or underloaded on that, or if they don't feel like they're getting like the career trajectory, different projects, mix some things up. I mean, all those kinds of things. In fact, I've done that mid-project where I've switched PMs. There was agreed upon. I wanted to make sure that somebody didn't feel like they were being pushed into a project that they loved or whatever, but it was switching it up so that they could have different experiences. But again, do what makes sense to keep people engaged and productive and accountable to delivering against their, let's say deliverables, but that is
they can deliver their deliverables.
But check in on a regular basis, watch for the early warning signs, and then, like any risk management, take steps to reignite engagement. Like risk management, you don't leave it unmanaged.
Well, and I mean, I think this is exactly it, right? So if somebody knows that those types of things are happening, they know there's going to be a meeting on their calendar, they know that there's going to be a pattern to follow, they know there's going to be something, they're also more likely to wait and bring that up in that next call or that next meeting or that next conversation, which means that you're setting them up for the opportunity as well, to be able to do that. But no, I totally agree. I think that it is 100% preventable. Preventable. I think it's preventable. I think it's manageable. And I think it's just a matter of being prepared.
I was so sure in that last paragraph that you were going to say, if you see something, say something.
No, I love that for you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for watching the show. Always a great conversation. For folks, if you're not yet following us out on the socials, you can find us all over the place out there. If you'd like to catch the entire series, the show, all the episodes are out on YouTube. And of course, I've been going in and modifying all of the descriptions, making everything more searchable. Numbers have all been going up, which is always great. And then of course, you can also sign up for our new, we haven't done the mailer by the time this, so forthcoming newsletter mailer, but you can sign up for it early there. And we'd love to be able to share that with people, talk more about it. Again, if you've not been out there, there it is. There's the contact form out there, just projectfailurefiles.com. And always happy to talk to folks about it. But otherwise, we'll be back next Monday and every Monday, the same time, 9 a.m. Pacific.
Forever and ever.
Honestly, we have weekly topics now through March of 2026. So far, it's continuing. We got more planned. So,
yes, we do.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.